Well, I guess the hangover is here after all. Kansas State loses to Texas Tech in a really embarrassing fashion in Manhattan for the first time since 2008. Let's break it down. Overreactions, your questions and comments, and so much more right here on Locked On Kansas State.
You are Locked On Kansas State, your daily podcast on the Kansas State Wildcats, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
Yes, welcome on into Locked On Kansas State, your daily Kansas State Wildcats podcast. I'm your host, Christian Rao. Thank you so much for making Locked On Kansas State your first listen every single day. Welcome back to my everydayers. If you're watching this one live, as we are right now, you're probably feeling a little bummed out because that's definitely how I feel right now as well. Texas Tech taking down K-State in embarrassing fashion, dare I say, 43-20 in this one. And it was the 5 takeaways. It was the fumbles, the turnovers, the interceptions, the things that finally happened. The offense just broke. The offense was pretty rough in this one. And the defense, I think, did a really good job overall. I really can't say too much against the defense. And let's be honest here. You know, I was trying to be hopeful this entire week heading into this game. Texas Tech is a really good team. They deserve a lot of credit here. We're going to be focusing on the Kansas State side, of course, but Texas Tech deserves a lot of credit. They are a good football team. I don't think Baron Morton was 100%. He still found a way to help this team put up 40-something points in Manhattan. And for the first time since 2008, they win in Manhattan. And the first time since 2015, they actually beat Kansas State. The last time there was a quarterback for Texas Tech that beat K-State, Patrick Mahomes was that quarterback. So Baron Morton is now in that conversation. Bring your comments in, your questions. We're going to answer them on this show, but let's get to a reaction here. We got to start with the offensive side. I thought this could have been a huge redemption game for Matt Wells. It was the complete opposite. And that's unfortunate, but it's absolutely what happened here. Matt Wells failed to get this offense humming. And I want to say that it wasn't all of his fault. I think some of the play calling was okay initially, but the turnovers just kept piling it up. And you can't get yourself out of a hole when you have 5 turnovers. And some of them were multiple fumbles. It could have been more too. One was turned over. Jace Brown had 2 fumbles. One of them was reviewed and called back. They got lucky on that one, in my opinion, because I thought that was actually a fumble. The replay review room or whatever they call that for the Big 12, I think was very inaccurate, very inconsistent on today for both sides of Texas Tech and Kansas State. They probably need to do a review of that one after this game. But overall, this is a really tough game to watch. Avery Johnson, I think, did a really good job running the football. But when they tried to move some other things, Texas Tech's defense stepped up. Jacob Rodriguez is a dog. That guy is absolutely insane. Can't wait to watch him play on Sundays and not against K-State because he's impressive. He might be the best defensive player in the country, let alone in the Big 12. You know, not enough offensive plays. Although they didn't really get anything going, period, there just wasn't enough offensive plays for them, period. They only had 63 offensive plays compared to Texas Tech's 76. But if you looked at how the first half looked, there was a stat that came up on the broadcast, on Fox's broadcast to start the second half. And once Kansas State played their 23rd offensive play, they showed a graphic, and Texas Tech already had 27 plays inside of K-State's territory when that happened. So even though I think the better of the two halves, if we're going to go into consideration here, I think K-State's offense played much better in the first half for sure. They still didn't have enough chances to get things moving. So overall, it was just a really tough game for K-State. Keep dropping those comments, and I see them popping in. I really appreciate them so much on this live reaction show right here on Locked On Kansas State. I'm looking through my notes here. The first thing that I wrote down was Austin Romaine. That was the first thing I written down because Texas Tech was driving on that opening drive, and they were nickel and diming this defense right away. And it looked like they were going to have an opening drive touchdown. It really did. I didn't feel good about it from the get-go. I thought they were doing a really good job finding the holes. They had a really good script to begin the game. And then Baron Morton made a mistake. He went for a screen. That screen wasn't there. And Austin Romaine, with his club hand and all, got an interception. And I thought that was huge redemption for a guy who had 8 missed tackles last week, dealing with that hand injury, still knows that he needs to be out there. Chris Kleiman said that all week about how he needs to be out there, how important he is to that defense, and him getting that first turnover of the game was huge. And I think it would have meant even more if it wasn't for Avery Johnson inevitably throwing his first interception, something that we kind of said it's inevitable. It's going to happen eventually, the very next play. And that was kind of a narrative I felt that we might get that. And I didn't want to jinx it, but I was definitely feeling that, man, we're talking about this hangover way too much. We're talking about how the Kansas State defense leads the country in takeaways, and Avery Johnson doesn't have any takeaways. It was bound to happen, folks. It was, if you believe in that kind of stuff, it was bound to happen 100%. I thought Avery bounced back. I thought he was excellent on the ground rushing. This is going to be the first game ever as in his career starts where he has more than 13 carries in a game and they don't win it. So, I mean, you take that on, either blame it on him, blame it on the offense, blame it on the fumbles, whatever you want to do. But this is the first game that Avery Johnson has more than 13 carries in a football game and they don't win it. He wound up with how many carries? He had 15 carries for 88, 2 touchdowns, and should have been 3 touchdowns. He got one called back for a holding. They did score on that drive, thankfully. But overall, this defense was tough. Jace Brown had a really bad day. And if it wasn't for the one, the 132-yard pass reception by Jace Brown later on in the game, it would have been even worse. But he fumbled two catches. One of them got called back. It just was a tough one. Garrett Oakley had probably the play of the game with his touchdown, but also had some issues with drops and fumbles as well. And then, of course, Avery Johnson had his fumble for a scoop 6 at the end of the game. This was a really tough game to watch, and you just kind of kept watching it unfold as it did, where you had turnover after turnover. And this is probably how TCU felt a couple weeks ago. This is probably how KU felt last week with Kansas State with their 4 turnovers. K-State allowed 5 turnovers in this game against a Texas Tech defense that you don't want to give them any help. And you gave them 5 things of help, and really could say 6 because one got called back. And that's why they beat you by the way they did with a score of 43-20. They won by 23 points in your own house on Harley Day. That's tough. That's really tough. So now Big 12 hopes out the window. They're gone. There's no doubt about that. You hit your 3rd loss in the Big 12, and that's done. Even with the fact that Houston lost today, it was in your favor. Even though that Arizona State almost lost to Iowa State, and that could have helped you out as well. And then, of course, if you would have beat Texas Tech, you would have had the tiebreaker over them. It doesn't matter anymore. You are out of Big 12 consideration, especially the way that Cincinnati, BYU, that looks. Now you have to ask the question, can you go 2-1 over the next 3 games? And as of right now, when you look at the schedule, you say, okay, maybe it's doable. Absolutely, maybe it's doable. But how long does this hangover happen? Last year, this hangover was not the greatest, right? This hangover after KU last year against Houston when the wheels fell off. Now we're going to take on Oklahoma State in Stillwater. Now you're going to go to Salt Lake City to take on Utah. And then you finish the season against Colorado. Can you go 2-1 to make yourself at least get to a bowl game and go 6-6? 6-6. Make sure I said that right. That's tough. It's going to be a big question that we got to ask the rest of the way. And that's where we sit right now. The best you can go is 7-5. That is not as good as what we've had for the last few years. This is going to be the worst season since the COVID year for Chris Klieman. That's how it is. No matter what now. No matter what, this will be the worst year for Chris Klieman since the COVID year. How are you feeling about that? I'm not in the boat. I've already seen on social media, I'm not in the boat where we need to go back to fire Chris Klieman remarks. I'm not there yet. So if that's you, you can drop in the comments, but that's not me by any stretch of the imagination. I want to get to your comments because they're flowing in. I really appreciate that for sure. And I want to get to this defensive side. And then I have a bone to pick about a couple decisions with game management and I think honestly a little bit more of running the football as well. We'll get to that, of course, with your questions as well right after the break right here on this live reaction show of Locked On Kansas State. But first, NBA is back, and there's no better place to get in on the action than with FanDuel, the official sports betting partner of the NBA. Even if you missed the start of a game or want to ride the hot hand, FanDuel has live bets on everything for who will score next to fourth quarter comebacks, you name it. Plus, you can even combine your live bets into same game parlays for a shot at a bigger payout. It keeps every game exciting, especially when your team's making the late push. Right now, FanDuel is giving new customers $300 in bonus bets when your first $5 bet wins. So head to FanDuel.com, sign up, play your game with FanDuel, the official sports betting partner of the NBA. Welcome back to Locked On Kansas State. Hit that like and subscribe button. Hey, I checked my analytics over the last 28 days. 71% of you that watch this show are not subscribed. So do me a favor, make this Wildcat Nation even stronger. Hit that subscribe button to Locked On Kansas State. Really would appreciate that. Losing 43-20. And hey, I'm going to eat my shorts here. I thought we were going to get the upset. I thought that was going to happen. I went 27-24 with my score prediction against Kansas State, or against Texas Tech for Kansas State here, and I was completely wrong. I didn't predict 5 turnovers from K-State's offense. I didn't predict the fumbles. I mean, how can you? How can you think that was going to happen? We really haven't seen that kind of disastrous play, at least that egregious, all season long. This might be of a worse offensive performance if you take the rushing side of Avery Johnson out, because that was great. If you take that side out, this is probably in the same category as the Arizona game. Would you agree? I think that there's definitely some shades of it for sure. Before I get to the defensive side, one more thing I want to get in the offense here. I thought we had moments for Joe Jackson, and of course, if you look at his stats, only 10 carries, 25 yards. Maybe if you're only looking at the box score, you might not agree. But there was a couple times where I thought, man, he could keep breaking these. He had a 19-yard rush that was really impressive, where if he got shoestring tackled, but that one should have went for 6, to be completely honest. And of course, it goes back to what we said at the beginning of this, is that they just didn't have enough opportunities. And of course, the turnovers don't help. But I wish that there was more. I wish they would have got him the ball more. It was working with Avery Johnson, the way he was rushing the football, almost to the fact that it became more predictable. I wanted to get Joe Jackson in the action more. 10 carries for him wasn't enough. He only had 30 rushes on the entire day. 25 were split between Avery and Joe Jackson. He had 2 for Jace and 3 for Devon Rice. I don't think 10 was enough for Joe Jackson. Let me know what you think about that in the live chat here. I'm really curious. Of course, when you get down by a certain amount of time, that is when you have to throw away the running game, or at least put yourself in a consideration to either have a dual threat system with Avery, either can pass or throw. But I just thought there was way too more opportunities. I thought the offensive line did a pretty decent job for the most part with Joe Jackson, at least from what I saw. Maybe I'm blind. Let me know what you think there. But I wrote that down. I thought there just wasn't enough chances on this one. Gerard Tibbs, got to give you a shout out here for Tibbs. I mentioned some of the other receivers and tight ends. You had an excellent catch to keep one of the late game drives going here. You had 3 receptions for 54 yards. I really liked what I saw from the receivers when they got the opportunities, with the exception of Jace Brown with his fumbles. I thought that was just really tough, a tough game from him. But he's had a great season. There's been multiple games this year that we don't win without Jace Brown. Was he one of the major reasons why this game was lost? Yeah, he is. But in a hindsight on a season, it's hard to say, man, Jace Brown, what have you done for me lately? You've had a really good year so far. So although it's tough, I will say that, it is what it is. Next thing up here is I want to talk about the 2-point conversion. We'll finish this up, then we'll go to the defensive side. They go for the 2-point conversion when you're down by 9 points. Now, I understand the sentiment in the analytics. The analytics say that you should try and go for the 2-point conversion earlier than later, so you know what you have to do down the line. But after having a tough goal line stand with Garrett Oakley, you get one of the best catches that you have seen all season long. That momentum felt like it was in your corner. Now you go for 2, you miss it, and then you're down by 2 possessions still. Now, if you would have got it, you go by 7. 1 possession, of course, is a different ball game. But if you just kick the 1, you're down by 8 points. It still makes it 1 possession. It makes it 1 possession. That's it. You still have to get 2-point conversion. The game could end on a missed 2-point conversion. You lose by 2 points. I get that. I understand why you go for it early. But I feel like momentum means something, right? And I don't always agree with the broadcast, especially when the Fox broadcast is on there. But they were making a lot of good points there. Momentum means a lot of things. And I think if you kick that and you know in your mind that you're only down by 1 possession to a team that's been kicking your butt, even with turnovers, I thought that would have meant something. So do you think they should have went for 2 points there? Do you think they should have kicked it? I'd like to hear your thoughts in the live chat. Missed tackles were a big deal. We talked about how missed tackles were a huge concern in the Sunflower Showdown last week. Well, if that's the case, then I think it's going to be even worse when we look at the advanced data later on Sunday's episode, because I thought that there was some huge missed tackles, some absolutely huge missed tackles on this one. And they might even be even worse when it's all said and done. Zayshawn Rich didn't have the best game. Donovan McIntosh didn't have the best game. It was a pretty tough game for the secondary. There was multiple times where maybe it's a regression back to the mean, if you will. Maybe the luck that Joe Klannerman said wasn't part of the turnover thing finally ran out for the defense. But there was multiple times where this defense should have got interceptions, and they didn't. VJ Payne, I thought, could have had an interception on the sidelines, could have helped change the game around. I think Wesley Fair also had an opportunity to get one. That one I think would have been called back for a penalty regardless, but there was multiple times where this defense could have got turnovers, and they couldn't make it happen. They still got 2, but that's not enough when the other team, especially a team like Texas Tech, gets 5. Texas Tech is going to be nasty, and I think this is a team that will probably run the table. Maybe we'll find out. Next week they play BYU. That should be a college game day game if there's anything. Well, I don't know if ESPN will allow 2 Big 12 game days in a row, but that game is going to be huge now. And they have so much momentum. And I think they have the chance to make a really deep run. They feel like I feel like they're a better team than what Arizona State was last year. They looked like an all-around team, and I don't even know if they were firing all cylinders in this one. They were a dang good team. I don't think their rushing was that great, although they did rush for 130 or 187 yards. I don't think it was the best that we've seen from Tech all year. I thought K-State's defense did a pretty good job for what they had to deal with going back on the field a lot earlier because of the turnovers. So overall, I think Tech's a better team than what we saw today, which is sad. Because K-State just didn't belong in this game in the second half. They really didn't. This goes back to the fact of the hangover yet again after winning the Sunflower Showdown. The stakes are so high, and then you fall yet again. What does that mean for the rest of the season? That's going to be a really big question that we got to get into, and we're going to try and answer that this week along with some basketball questions as well. All right, let's get our final break here, and then I'm going to answer your questions and your comments, so get them flowing through here next, right here on Locked On Kansas State. But first, this episode of Locked On Kansas State is brought to you by Mazda. Mazda crafts cars for those who do more than simply move. Mazda delivers confidence with every ride with more IIHS Top Safety Pick Plus awards than anyone else as of August 25. With the all-wheel drive standard in every crossover SUV, you can drive with confidence through almost any season. Like our players, we sweat every detail because when you make every moment count, impossible becomes irrelevant. Mazda, move and be moved. All right, let's dive into some of these comments here. Thanks for listening and joining in on this live reaction show. If you're listening later on in audio, I really appreciate it too. And if you want to chime in on your thoughts, you can hit me up on Twitter X at LockedOnKState or at Christian S. Rao. I'll probably be up watching the World Series and so much more, and maybe with a frosty one trying to get some therapy after losing this one to Texas Tech 43-20. This is a tough loss. It was really tough. Did you feel at any point that this game could have happened? Did you ever feel like there was a comeback? I saw a couple things on social media that a lot of fans from Bill Snyder Family Stadium left early because they didn't think that comeback was happening. Is that complaints about the coaching staff, complaint about the talent? If you were one of them, or if you think you know the idea of one of them, let me know your thoughts in the comments. All right, let's start from the beginning here. Matt Wells got to go. So does Kleiman. I said it before. Get our boy Colin Klein. Well, Colin Klein, I've heard some rumors about another Big 12 school, so keep your mind on that one. But I'm going to mention this now. I see there's a couple other ones about the coaching staffs and stuff. I'm not there yet. I was kind of in the boat with Chris Kleiman earlier in the season. This is a really good Texas Tech team. And after having the wins against TCU and Kansas, yes, definitely feel a lot better about this coaching staff, that they can turn it around and that this team believes in them. There's no quit. And to me, that's good enough initially for a head coaching staff. I'm not going to say much about the coordinators, though. I do think that there may need to be some changes this offseason. Nothing in the middle of the season, though, for sure. But I do appreciate this. I think that this is something, especially in this new era of NIL, that the fans have a voice here. So definitely, if you believe in this, speak it up, make it your voice. AJ says this team is loaded with talent and we are flat. That was actually my first thing that I was going to lead off with this until they continue to fumble. And I said, I think we fumbled the bag here, but they did play flat. I felt like they played very flat this game. And it's almost like the hangover, right? They didn't drink their red Gatorade. They didn't take their couple Tylenols. They didn't get ready to go. I don't know. You guys still do that when you hang over? It's been a while for me, but that they just weren't ready. They just weren't ready. And it's tough. It was a really tough game to watch. 20 points almost feels like a miracle after watching this offense for the most part against this defense. And that's sad to say, but it really does. It felt like, especially in the end of the game here, towards the end of the second half, when they kept punting and it was inside the 20, like before the drives even started, it felt like, oh, there's no way they're getting that in the opponent's territory. Just the way this offense was humming, or they're probably going to find a way to make a turnover. It just felt inevitable that this game was just not going to go in favor of K-State. Really, after like the first drive of the third quarter, when Garrett Oakley had the fumble in the first drive of the second half, that's where I really thought was like, okay, this just isn't our day. Second half, it's like, man, you're really keeping first half, I said, man, you're really keeping Texas Tech in this game. You're really doing that. And you got to find a way to get it out of them. But that just wasn't the case, and that's how it went all done. K-State played tough, but it was a total talent mismatch, especially on the lines. Yeah, that defensive line of Texas Tech, David Bailey, he's a big dude, and he's running faster than some of the linebackers. I mean, there was a jet sweep that Jace Brown took, and David Bailey was keeping up with Jace Brown. And Jace Brown's probably, with the exception of Avery Johnson and a healthy Dylan Edwards, is probably the most athletic player on our offense. And David Bailey was keeping up with him. Yeah, that Texas Tech D-line is insane. And then, like Matt Wells said on Thursday, it's the three behind him, those linebackers, that make them go. And Jacob Rodriguez is just insane. I mean, our buddy over on Locked On Texas Tech, Chris Level, compared him to another Texas Tech legend and Zach Thomas. And he said they're even having questions on who's better. Is it Jacob Rodriguez or Zach Thomas? Like, they're having these comparisons at the college level. So pretty interesting that you might have just played somebody who could become an ex-NFL great with Jacob Rodriguez. And who knows about David Bailey. Texas Tech has playmakers everywhere on defense. Starter again. Appreciate you hopping in. And, okay, here's one. Can we all agree that the officials need to be investigated and suspended? There were some egregious miscalls. I don't know how that process works. I'm not going to sit here and act like I do, but I will say that the replays and the ideas of like the targeting call on Joe Jackson, some of the fumbles, like one on Jace Brown was reviewed, one wasn't. I thought the one that was reviewed actually worked in Kansas State's favor, because I thought that was a fumble and then they overturned it. And then the one that was a fumble, I thought was even worse. So they didn't review that one. So I think that it was just inconsistent. So I think there just needs to be a better way to be, I don't know, more transparent. You know, I know some of the replay centers actually let you listen in. Maybe that's how they do it. I'm not really sure on the process here, but I don't know about the actual officials, but the replay center definitely was a big question mark for me. Texas Tech has a better team, no doubt. Okay, good job. I don't disagree. I think Texas Tech is a good team. I thought there was a chance this team could make the upset. I never once this week said that Kansas State was a better team. I always went with the upset because, I mean, Texas Tech has done a lot of great things this offseason. They've really stepped up 100%. Does BYU have a chance? Hey, I don't know if you should count out BYU. And I know we're kind of going into these comments here. We're going to next week with Texas Tech and BYU. I don't know if you should count out BYU, because everybody seems to be doing that all season long. We've had a huge conversation about that with the Big 12 squad, with all the hosts here in our group chat. You know, with our preseason rankings, we moved BYU down. Before the Retzlaff move, we had BYU as one of the top teams. And Bear Backmeyer has been a better quarterback, and I think that offense might even be better with BYU. So I wouldn't count them out. They found a way to come back against Iowa State last week. I would personally think Texas Tech wins that game, but I wouldn't count BYU out in the slightest one bit. Respect to Avery and K-State. He did all he could with his legs. That defense kept us alive, and for Morton to settle in, wrecking with Austin. So Texas Tech fan, thanks for listening. I really appreciate that. And no, I'm with you. I think with the exception of Avery Johnson in this one, in his rushing game, because he wasn't the great with passing. There was multiple times where he did not throw the ball at all. 48% completion rating. And usually I look at that and I say, okay, we need to kind of put that one to the side. There was a lot of drops, a lot of issues. Avery was gassed a lot of moments in this game because of him running the football. And you could tell there was a lot of times where he threw that pass or threw multiple passes that were short, some to like Joe Jackson on the outside on like a 3-yard flat or something like that, a little wheel route. And Joe Jackson had to come back to it and he'd fall over instead of, potentially getting a first down. And those are throws on Avery. So I don't think Avery had a good game in the passing department. I really don't. He was great in the rushing department, but for sure. He was great running the football. 15 carries, 88 yards, 2 touchdowns, should have been 3 touchdowns, averaging just under 6 yards a carry. You'd like to see that from your actual running back, though, because you didn't get that from anywhere else when it comes to the passing. One of my biggest concerns I had all week, and I said you can't make Kansas State one-dimensional any way, shape, or form. And I was more focused on saying if the running game doesn't work, you can't make this team one-dimensional with Avery Johnson passing the ball. And it was more of a thought on the offensive line because the offensive line struggled to struggled to run block this entire season. It was kind of the complete opposite, where Avery Johnson got the running game working. They had to only really be one-dimensional with him running the football the entire game because Texas Tech's secondary was outstanding. Texas Tech's defensive pressure on Avery Johnson when he was trying to throw the football was outstanding, and he couldn't throw the football. So I think it's a little bit of both. I think Avery Johnson just didn't have the best day throwing the football, and I think you have to give a lot of credit to Texas Tech's defensive pressure because of that. Okay, a couple people talking more about head coaching things. This is one about talking bad about Colin Klein. No, that's a first. I haven't seen that one. Okay, Danny Boy, nice to see you in here. I know the Dylan Edwards conversation is neither here nor there, but missing that threat really shows this game offensively. It makes you wonder. Some of the coaching decisions hurt us too. No, that's for sure. Definitely some coaching decisions that hurt us. It does make you wonder, right? Like if you had a healthy Dylan Edwards, what would this game be like? But I think we've asked that question, 5 times this year already? If you had a healthy Dylan Edwards, what's Iowa State look like? What does some of these other games? What does Baylor look like? What does and he played in Baylor, but he wasn't healthy, of course. And of course, what does this game look like? So no, I completely get you 100%. And then talk about that 2-point conversion, going for 2 points at that killed any momentum we had. I'm right there with you. I think overall, when you look back at it and you say, okay, this is the right decision, you make this decision because then you know that you have to go whatever. You have to go for 2 later on in the game, or if you go for 2 now, then you have a better chance, whatever the case. The analytics, the nerds, make more sense in that department, and they go off trends, they go off numbers, and there are a lot of football games around the world that help bring in these numbers, and these coaches go for that, and I get it. I'm mostly behind a lot of advanced data, but I think there are moments in the game that you cannot take the human element out. You absolutely just can't take the human element out, and I think momentum is one of them for sure. If you're down by 9 points against a tough team like Texas Tech, and you have the opportunity to move it to only a 1-possession game, I think you take that every time. I think that's rolling a 7, in my opinion, when you're rolling dice, 100%. Defense is real. Okay, sounds like we got tech fans in here. Really appreciate that. Key drop passes, fumbles. Yeah, the fumbles were rough. The fumbles were not good at all. It was just a really tough game. Who do you got in game 7? Okay, I like this. I'm going to say Toronto. I want Toronto to do it. That's probably why I'm rooting for them. I'd love to see Vlad Jr. or George Springer have a Joe Carter moment. So that's what I'd like to see. So I'm going to go Blue Jays in game 7 here. Although it would be kind of cool to see Clayton Kershaw have a cool moment because he's going to be retiring after this game. Looks like Starter wants Blue Jays as well. I thought Avery had a couple of perfect placement passes, especially that last touchdown, the deep down the right. He had some good passes. Now, I'm not saying that he was completely cheeks, right? But what I am saying, I don't think it was his best game by any means, or even remotely close. I'm not going to put it in the same category as the Arizona game, where I think it was the worst game that Avery Johnson's ever played in a Kansas State uniform. But it wasn't, the game against TCU, wasn't the game against, Baylor, where he had really good passing yards or his completion percentage was a lot higher. So I think that there was a lot of issues there. And again, I don't know if you can even point all of the blame to Avery Johnson. I think that he was doing everything he possibly could. You've even seen that from Tech fans coming in these comments saying, he did everything he could with his legs, and this Tech defense is just really good. I don't think Kansas State has seen anything like that, even remotely close, all season long. And you add in the hangover element of losing winning the Sunflower Showdown, and then playing a tough defense like that. I think you just weren't ready. I think overwhelmed. I think Chris Kleiman, Matt Wells, Joe Klinnerman, I think they were overwhelmed against Texas Tech in this one. Let's see. Let's get a couple more here. Someone said Dodgers. I'm not even going to put that up there because I'm not a Dodgers fan by any means. And the game didn't pass him. He's just a mid at. Okay, I don't know what that is. Must be talking about something in the comments. And then, okay, here's one more. Hard to have a good game when you're running for your life because the line can't block anyone. That gave me the shades of the Arizona game, where I was looking at, the offensive line yelling back to Avery Johnson. It was like, look out blocks. That's really what it felt like in that one. But I thought overall, the offensive line, for who they were going up against, actually probably played a pretty good game. We're going to look at the advanced snaps and data and the stuff like that during the week. And I have a feeling the numbers might not be great, but I also think that it's not going to be terrible either. This defense is just really good, and they deserve all the credit in the world for sure. We're going to dive more into these advanced datas. We're going to dive more into what does this mean for the rest of the season for K-State this week. We got a really tough game coming up. Don't look at records. When talk about, for Texas Tech fans, they know about the storyline when you head into Manhattan. Now that storyline, of course, is over, but K-State has that same feeling when going to Stillwater, and that's something that's coming up next for K-State. So appreciate you joining this live reaction show of Locked On Kansas State. We'll be back here with another episode tomorrow, diving into the analytics and so much more. And then we got basketball to talk about. Both men's and women, they start on Monday and Tuesday. We're going to do deep dives and, of course, reaction shows to all of that. So please like the video. Please subscribe. We'll see you back here next time right here on Locked On Kansas State.